What is up? This is Bodhi with Bodhi Tree Social, and right now I'm going to delve into the concept of how to transcend the collective culture of complacency and mediocrity. To specify what I mean by this is, if we just look around us, there's a lacking of the exceptional or the extraordinary or the vibrancy of human beings, the aptitude of self-expression and the giving of our gifts, the actualizing of our truest potential. There's such a scarcity of that in our society. It's almost non-existent, right? The vast majority of human beings are just basically going with the cultural norms, just going with the tide of the conditioned like social consciousness, so to speak. And this conditioned consciousness and way of being is vastly limited. It's so limited in terms of what our actual potential is. And why does this happen? Well, I think first and foremost, it's important to realize what drives human beings. And we may think that we are these like higher beings, these like, more evolved beings than say other mammals or other animals and organisms, but intrinsically we are biological organisms. And what dictates our behavior, first and foremost, is our biology and our biological hardwiring. And so we are hardwired to continuously seek survival. And what allows us to survive is that which makes us feel comfortable. So for instance, when we are lacking a certain human need, for example, food or water or shelter, we feel inherently uncomfortable, and that discomfort drives us to meet these needs so that we can get back to a state of comfort and homeostasis. So human beings, above all, actually seek comfort, right? We would like to think that we seek this super expansive state of ultimate achievement and, this like extraordinary, exceptional life of achieving our goals and actualizing our dreams and all of that, but that actually isn't the fundamental thing that human beings seek. That's a secondary thing that comes into play. Once we have our basic needs met, once we have achieved that comfort, then for some rarefied beings, we continue to pursue these higher aims and these higher ambitions. So why is it that only certain beings or certain human beings go for this, right? Or seek this higher way of being, so to speak? Well, it's really hard to say. I don't think there's a very obvious or clear answer to that question. I would like to just give you a very straightforward response to that, but I don't really know. I think it could be a combination of things like genetics, things like certain conditions in one's upbringing. Sometimes a extreme amount of suffering can create this sort of like evolutionary pressure that causes someone to pop, and so they all of a sudden like shoot forward towards these higher goals and aims and towards this exceptional, extraordinary life, because that pressure of suffering created so much force that it drove them forward to this higher state, this higher way of being, right? So I think that's one element of it. And I think to go even deeper than that, you could say it's almost like the grace of God, so to speak, right? It's like, why do some beings, say, attain a state of awakening or enlightenment and others don't, right? Why are some people called to this higher state of being or this higher ideal? Well, I think part of it is inexplicable in a sense, and it's more like, it's almost like, why does anything exist in the first place? Well, how do you even explain that? How does something come from nothing? I think it kind of surpasses words, but it's almost like something beyond this physical material realm wants to shine through, wants to come through and be birthed into this world. And it is both beyond and within this physical form, this physical manifestation. But this element is something that it becomes difficult to convey in words. It becomes difficult for the intellect or the mind to grasp. And so I think this will kind of bring me to my next point, which is the limitation of human beings to a large degree is actually created through this conditioning of the mind or the intellect, and in a sense this identification with limiting beliefs and limiting stories that's conditioned into the subconscious, and it gets passed on from generation to generation. And in Eastern philosophy they talk about the identification with form, and this is a part of it, this identification with the story of who you are, what you're capable of, you know, what your abilities are and what your limitations are. And over time this becomes cemented into the psyche, and then you'll see as people get older, usually they're not breaking beyond their limitations even more. Usually they're actually becoming more limited. These limitations are becoming more cemented into their way of being, right? It's also almost becoming more ossified, right? Most people as they get older, it's almost like an ossification of sorts takes place, like a calcification instead of an expansiveness taking place, which is what is actually possible. You can actually continue to expand and move forth. And also a huge component of this is, as I said before, the social conditioning. So oftentimes as we navigate our lives and we, navigate society, see different people and strangers and so forth, instead of being very expressive and expansive with our energy, we tend to be more closed off, right? It's like, I even notice this in myself. If I walk past a group of people, I'm not like, oh, hey, what's up? Super expressive and expansive with my energy. It's more of like this closing off and almost like a protection. So it's like there's a certain awkwardness there. There's a certain unpleasantness and a strangeness to it. That's why we call it people strangers, because there's a certain strangeness, especially when it comes to interacting with them. And I think because we evolved in a tribal community, and we would have this kinship with the people around us, when we evolved into modern society, which has been very, very recent, actually, in the past couple hundred years. It's extremely recent that this has taken place. And so for us to adapt to this, it's going to take a long period of time. And I think it's important to recognize that, the way that we function and operate is akin to how we did in caveman times, so to speak, right? We haven't really evolved beyond that. We still have that need for a tribe, right? A community, to play a certain role, to have a sense of belonging. And we've moved into such a space of separation and isolation as individual beings. It's completely unnatural for the human being, and it creates a lot of stress on the system, things like anxiety, depression. This is why people abuse drugs. This is why, a lot of people end up committing suicide, is because of this isolation and disconnection from the group, the social group and the tribe. So a huge part of what I like to teach is this social freedom, this capacity to connect and bring people back together, this togetherness. It's like the unification of oneness and separation, right? Is this togetherness, right? Where it can meet in that interim, so to speak. And I think this is huge. And so in order to overcome this, you could say, gravitational pull of collective complacency or mediocrity, it takes a high degree of, discipline. It takes a high degree of commitment to doing the things that are necessary, even when there's fear or resistance to doing it. You have to, in a sense, force yourself. And this becomes difficult because, again, as I said, we all want to be comfortable, but stepping beyond mediocrity is intrinsically uncomfortable because we're stepping outside of the social norm, right? It's like if you're in like a warm, like hot tub, so to speak, it's kind of like getting out and going into the icy cold plunge or the cold winter or something like that. It's like we're all kind of in this warm bath and we're trying to maintain that sense of comfort. And this is collective social conditioning and groupthink. It's that warm bath that we're all immersed in, right? And so a lot of people break out of this because they experience a lot of discomfort and suffering. The system doesn't work for them, and so they break out of it. But what I'm interested in is how do you break out of it in a way that is also creating a movement of a new way of being for the collective, right? Not breaking out of it in terms of separating yourself like a monk who goes to meditate in the cave, but still being immersed in society and helping to create a better future for the collective, and helping people to break out of this, as I said, this ossified state of conditioning and limiting beliefs and whatnot. And I think for me, the most important aspect of this is social mastery, social freedom, moving into a state of freedom of self-expression. This is also one of the most challenging things because there's such a taboo around social freedom, and our biology is hardwired to, as I said, maintain that state of safety and comfort. And when we are freely expressing ourselves in front of strangers, it kicks in that sort of fight or flight response, or that sense of shame. We're afraid of rejection or experiencing a negative response. Or in the past, in our caveman days, we could have potentially gotten killed for that, right? For freely expressing ourselves if it was in the wrong environment. So we wanted to sort of hide. We wanted to not rock the boat so much, so to speak. So to in a sense go against your biology and the hardwiring of your nervous system, it takes a lot of discipline and willpower and commitment. You got to really commit to this path, and you have to see the higher goal. You have to see the purpose of it. You have to have a really powerful why, because if you don't, you're not going to do it. So you need to clarify why you want to break out of this, collective state of complacency and mediocrity. Why do you want to break free from that? Why is that important to you? You have to really clarify that, and then you have to commit to that path. You have to commit to breaking free from this resistance and these different holding patterns, because it's always going to be easier to just go with the norm, to go with the flow, the current of society. It's always going to be easier. So to choose to go against it is challenging, and it's a lot easier when you have a group of people who are committed to this path and who help to push you in that direction. And this is something that I have personally created with an online group, Men's Lifestyle Mastery. So I specifically help to teach and coach men how to break out of this conditioning, how to break out of these cultural norms, so to speak, how to rise above the gravitational pull of mediocrity and complacency, and how to transcend into a higher, more elevated state of complete freedom, where you no longer have this resistance and this oppression and suppression of your feelings and your self-expression, and you're not in the state of protecting yourself, but you're in this free-flowing, expansive state. And you know you're in that state when you feel light, you feel a sense of lightness, levity, you laugh easily, you joke easily, you can have fun. And when we look at collective society, this is a pretty rare thing. Usually we'll see it when people are hanging out with their friends and people they're close with, then it's easier. But how beautiful and amazing is it if you can just talk to strangers and joke around, maybe talk to someone of the opposite sex you're interested in, and just joke around and have fun, and it's light and it's free, and there's not this shame and nervousness and fear and awkwardness, but it's just, there's that sense of freedom. It's like in the past when communities would have this town square, and people would come together and connect with each other freely and have an amazing time, and even talk to people who are strangers, but they're not really strangers, right? It's part of your human family. And so coming back to the sense of we're all part of the same family, we're all part of the same human family, and having the sense of kinship with one another. So developing this in the modern day, bringing back these sort of ancient tribal roots back to the surface in these modern times, I think that's the way forward. That's the way that we're going to transcend the different problems that we have with society. This is how we're going to resolve these deeper issues, and this is how we're going to resolve this collective conditioning of mediocrity, complacency, depression, suffering, all of this. There is a way to transcend it, but again, there has to be that commitment to the process. So yeah, I think that feels complete. That's really what I wanted to share. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Remember, as always, live this life from a peak experience. This has been Bodhi Tree Social, and we'll talk soon. Much love, my friends, much love. Peace.